Welcome to the Coaching Corner, a podcast for coaches in the child welfare field. From the Public Child Welfare Training Academy, a special project of San Diego State University's School of Social Work. On today's episode, we'll be talking about facilitating child and family team meetings with families with our guest, Candice Kimball. I'm your host, Bill James, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we're talking with Candice Kimball, one of the practice consultants for the Public Child Welfare Training Academy. Good morning, Candice.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Great.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I started my work with Los Angeles County. I was a children's social worker. Then I later moved on to mental health, where I became a psychiatric social worker for the child welfare population. And then I moved on to training and coaching for some of the mental health providers, such as wraparound, intensive treatment foster care, and some of the multidisciplinary team coordinators. And then later on, I am currently working with the Public Child Welfare Training Academy, providing training and coaching for San Bernardino County.
So now that you're in working with San Bernardino County, there's been a lot of focus lately on the child and family team meeting process. How have you been involved with that?
I've been doing a lot of training and coaching of staff and supervisors, managers, and even deputies around the child and family team process. I think the beauty of it is that everyone is so excited about it and that it's on everyone's radar and that they really want to get this thing right. So I've been helping facilitate meetings. I've been facilitating discussions around it. I've helped some of the managers and deputies identify areas in their practice where they could definitely incorporate child and family team meetings also.
That's cool. You know, the other thing that I really appreciate about your experience over in Los Angeles is that it was, I know we've had prior conversations where it seems like you've worked really hard to be solution-focused and trauma-informed in how you approach this process with the families that you worked with in Los Angeles, and that seems to come through in your work here too.
Great. Yes, absolutely. That was a big part of the process, especially with KDA, that we needed to be trauma-informed and solution-focused. So right. I'm glad that you're able to see that.
Yeah, it shines through. Well, so let's talk a little bit about what do you think are the most important things to remember? We had Jenny Ossing on for our last podcast to talk about just meeting facilitation in general. So what do you think turns out to be some of the most powerful things to keep in mind when facilitating meetings with families?
One thing that I have seen that's really effective is pre-meetings. So really pre-meeting with the family and preparing them around what to expect so that there are no surprises. Sometimes we come into meetings and if we don't know what's going on, we feel like we're all over the place. But just giving the family that opportunity to feel that they're prepared and ready to go also.
So what are some of the this pre-meeting thing? What are some important things that you try to accomplish during that?
Well, first, I want folks to understand the purpose of the pre-meeting. So I said, really giving the family that understanding of what's going on, but also giving them that space to think through some of what's working well, some of their worries, and also what are some next steps also. And then the pre-meeting also gives the family an opportunity to identify additional supports that maybe they didn't think about before, and also additional folks that could be part of their safety network.
Do you find that people need a little extra time to process that?
Absolutely. I think that they definitely need extra time to think about what they want to say, think about what are some of their needs, think about what are some of their concerns, think about what are some of the strengths. Like sometimes you need a little more time to process that information so that you can really provide more information during the meeting, and it lends itself to a much richer discussion.
You know, I'm also, while I'm hearing you explain that, I'm also thinking that having time to consider the answers to these questions ahead of time would make people feel safer when they finally show up for the meeting.
Absolutely. It helps families feel safer, and it's more trauma informed.
Okay. Well, so that's a lot of good reasons to have those pre-meetings. Some people try to give the family a little heads up about the group agreement process. Is that something that you touch on too?
So yeah, definitely having a conversation with the family before the meeting around group agreements would definitely be beneficial for the family. So it gives them the opportunity to start thinking about what do they need from us as professionals to help them feel safe and also help the meeting run a lot more smoother for themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think those of us, you know, in the profession have been to so many meetings where group agreements were formed that we just think everybody knows how to do them. And in fact, most of our families have never had to deal with that. So
no, not at all.
I know we also talk a little bit about keeping people safe when there are maybe issues of intimate partner violence or something like that. Any pre-planning that you do with the social worker about how to address maybe no contact orders or stuff like that?
So really having a pre-meeting about safety with the social worker, and if there are any no contact orders, sometimes, I know this sounds weird, but we might have to have 2 separate child and family team meetings. So if that is the case, but we want to make sure that at all times, the children and the families that we serve are safe. Okay. So getting that understanding from the social worker ahead of time so that we're prepared for what's going to happen.
Right. Well, and rather than just exclude maybe the family member that the order you know is impacting, in order to really engage with them, we may just have to have another meeting that involves them.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to make sure that everyone is part of the process in some form of a way.
Okay, so we've done this work. We sat down and helped prepare the family for what's to come. When you finally get everybody together and you're running the meeting, what are some things that you've found that's most effective?
Well, the family is already aware of the agenda because we had a conversation during the pre-meeting around the agenda, but also providing just basic structure and reiterating like what the purpose of the meeting is about, and having them share some of the group agreements that they came up with on their own, or some of the group agreements that they came up with while having the pre-meeting with the social worker.
Okay.
So those are things that help them feel safe.
Okay. So our outline talks a little bit about providing context. What does that mean to you, and what's effective with families around that?
For me, that means really setting the stage for us to have this conversation. Why am I here? What are you guys all doing here? So providing context kind of softens it up to let them know, again, just to reiterate again, why is the family here? Why are they sitting here in front of us? What are some things that we are expecting to discuss for our time together today? What are some things that actually are getting in the way of us having these conversations? Or is there anything happening outside of this room that may be impacting the way we interact today? Okay. So really making space and making room for that conversation.
Okay. We've got a stage here where we in our outline for developing the group agreements with the family. Um, we have a stage where we talk about who's in the network and who are the stakeholders that need to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have sort of the main content of the meeting that is, creating the care plan or safety plan, whatever is needed on that particular day. How do you like to transition into those processes?
Usually, one thing I would like to point out is that although the handout has a specific order outlined as to how to run the meeting, there are times where you may switch it up depending on what the needs of that group, what the needs of the group are, or what's happening right there in front of you. So depending on what's going on, I may start out with introductions and maybe group agreements, or I may go into the context and then start developing group agreements.
Gotcha.
It really depends on what's happening at that moment.
Well, so I think what you're pointing out is that facilitation is an art, not necessarily a rote set of steps. So that's important.
Absolutely.
Important
Yeah.
to keep in mind.
One important thing about facilitation is being flexible. There have been times where I've had to kind of run out and not grab a kid, but run out and encourage a child to come back into the room. Now that's
Yes.
not here. That's not written here on the handout.
That's right.
However, that's kind of part of the structure, like time out, let me go,
Yeah.
grab her really quick before she gets to the street.
Yeah.
So just really being flexible and being okay if the group is okay with spending a couple of extra minutes talking about what's working well, that's fine. Don't feel like, no, I have to dedicate only 5 minutes to what's working well, 5 minutes to the worries. It's good to hear what's working well. So really being flexible within the structure of the meeting.
Oh, that's good to know. I know you mentioned around context, you make sure you talk a little bit about why are we here. It seems to me like another useful question is how did the family get to where they are, and what was life like for them before? Is that something that you find helpful also?
Absolutely. I call it sharing the family story. So having the family just share their story. Not only is it solution focused, but it's also trauma informed by letting them kind of lead us to what life was like for them before they came to our attention. Gotcha. So I usually have families during the pre-meeting, also having that opportunity to prepare them to share their story, but then having it really come out during the child and family team meeting, I found has been a really powerful experience, because sometimes we hear things that maybe we didn't know, or we learn things that maybe we missed that were in the court report, or maybe missed by whoever wrote the report. But it's just that opportunity to really hear from our families what life was like for them.
Wow. Okay. Super. Any examples of when that was especially powerful?
Oh, goodness, yes. So I had a child and family team meeting some years ago, and we were at the table again, trying to figure out why did this child run away, or what they call AWOL, run away from placement again. And she was about 16 at the time. So what we did was we had a moment where we asked her to share her story. So what was life like before you got involved with child and family services, before social workers became involved with your family? And this child actually went back and was able to recall certain events from age 4 on to age 16. So she was able to talk about things such as her mother leaving, domestic violence between her parents, moving from home to home, living with a grandparent in the back room, but then being kicked out by the grandparent with her father. It was so amazing to hear how all of this really led up to how she lived her life right now.
Wow.
So it became where we no longer looked at what was going on, which was her running away from placement, to what we start now having a better understanding of what was causing her leaving placement. So that was trauma-informed, but it also gave us a better understanding of where should we go next in terms of placement for this child, because we wanted to make sure that it also addressed that underlying trauma need that she had.
Wow.
And so at the end of the meeting, the social worker scratched her head and said, I didn't know this. And then also I remember the independent living coordinator mentioned, like, all this time, I thought she just wanted to run away. I never knew that she had a history like that.
Wow.
So it was very powerful for us to make a better decision for the child.
That's awesome. I had a similar experience recently where giving some parents a chance to tell their story, and this was late in the game in terms of family reunification, as close to the time they were going to recommend permanent plan, and it turned out that, hate to admit it, but the worker that had done one of the earliest reports reported criminal activity on the part of a dad that actually didn't exist. And the worker was able to go back, review his rap sheet, and correct the record, which had a profound effect on the visitation, the ability for the family to move forward. And and the parents just didn't know that there was ever an opportunity to correct a mistake that had been made earlier in the case. So
that's powerful.
Yeah, it made a big difference for that family. So you get through listening to the family story. What are some other important pieces to working with families?
So really making sure that everyone in the room has a voice. So after we listen to the family story, really getting the voice from everyone who's actually taken the time out to come to the meeting and talk about what are some of the areas of strength for the family, and also what are some of their worries too.
Okay. How does that go? Is that always a smooth process?
Sometimes it isn't, depending on who's in the room. Sometimes you can have two folks in the room who have competing agendas. This person wants the child placed, and this person wants the child in their home. This person wants visits. It really depends. Sometimes it's a smooth process where everyone agrees. Sometimes it's not a smooth process. And when it isn't a smooth process, then we really have to make sure that we are listening to everyone. That's even more reason to listen to everyone at the table when we don't have a consensus of what should happen next, so that we can make the most informed decision.
Listening to everybody is important, but then what do you have to finally get to?
Yeah. At the end, we need to come up with a decision that's in the best interest of that child and family.
Right. How do you handle getting to next steps?
The great thing about the child and family team process, if it's a fluid and flexible process, sometimes next steps naturally evolve throughout the conversation. So if there aren't any next steps, which sometimes I can't imagine there not being any next steps, but if there aren't any next steps, then we just open up the conversation. All right, where do we go from here? What needs to happen next? Who needs to do what? And really having the group come up with some of that.
Gotcha.
I found that depending on what's going on with the family, as I'm hearing next steps, I'm jotting them down already.
Right.
So now it's a matter of, okay, when does this need to be done by? Who's going to do it? And how will we know it was actually accomplished? So next steps could be that, or it can actually be adding more to the list that's already been started.
Right. So you don't necessarily solve all the problems all at one time. It could be that there were next steps from a prior meeting that you're reviewing.
There could be next steps from a prior meeting, or, for example, if we are in a child and family team meeting and we notice that the child, and the caregiver mentions that the child has been sick and then we'll say, okay, we need to make sure that he goes to the doctor. Like, that's the next step that we automatically write down during the meeting, that, we don't have to wait till the end to write that down, but we should be writing that down throughout the entire process.
Gotcha. So again, it's that being a little bit fluid and capturing the ideas throughout the meeting to be sort of settled on later at the end.
Absolutely. Cool. Yes.
And then on our outline, we have this plus delta and closing. How do you use that in working with families?
So I oftentimes ask the family, I explain the plus delta process. It's really and just breaking it down to, it's really feedback about how this meeting worked for your time, worked for your family, and really, how did you feel that we treated you? Like, were we respectful towards the needs of your family? So really explaining what the process is and asking anyone in the room what worked well about this meeting, or what were some things that we definitely should upgrade for the next meeting. And I want them to know for the next meeting, because I want them to already be thinking that we're going to have another child and family team meeting.
Gotcha.
That this wasn't a one-time deal, but for the next meeting, what can we do differently to make this process work better for your family or to run more smoothly? So really just having that conversation and modeling to everyone how open we are and for feedback.
Wow. And that's got to be a powerful experience. I mean, I know that our profession has not always been that great at asking, how can I do a better job for you?
Right.
And so giving families a chance to tell us that has got to feel empowering for them.
And I also asked, as a facilitator, is there anything I could have done differently to help this meeting run smoothly for you? And really modeling that to the entire group, that I'm even open for feedback also.
Excellent. And then is there anything that you like to make sure you do after the meeting is over?
Yeah. So after the meeting is over, I like to just have a brief conversation, like a debrief with the social worker and the supervisor, not really the whole team, because it's not about us meeting behind the family's back, but really with the social worker and supervisor around what were some things that they learned about the family that maybe they didn't know. And my hope is that they were able to learn things by listening to the family story or by listening to some of the team members. This provides like an area for practice change, but also for them to say, oh, I didn't know this about the family, or maybe I could have asked a little bit more about their story, or maybe I could have, discussed with them what were some of the needs throughout the life of the case. So really having that moment of reflection for them to see what did they learn also.
Well, and it also sounds like you do some coaching around what are some upgrades that the social worker or supervisor could do in the future around the questions that they ask families.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
So that as a coach, they're improving their practice even when you're not around.
Exactly. And so for example, that may have been for that family, but maybe you're going on a home visit with another family today. Maybe you can start asking some of these questions.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. That brings it all back to, the coaching and the continued learning for our workforce.
Absolutely.
Before we wrap up, any last minute thoughts any advice that you'd have for social workers that are embarking on this facilitation with families process?
I would say be kind to yourselves.
Oh, really? Okay.
So the facilitation, it takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of practice. Just with any new skill, you're going to have to practice it a little bit. So if you feel, the first meeting, maybe didn't go as well as someone who as a coach who may have facilitated the meeting. That's okay, but just get started and start the process and get better at it.
Get started and get better. I love that advice.
Get started and get better.
And be kind to yourself.
And be kind, because you're going to have some bumps, but you'll also have some meetings that run really smooth for you also.
Candace, we want to thank you so much for joining us today for this Coaching Corner podcast.
No problem. Thank you, Bill.
We're clearly going to have you back sometime. You've been listening to a podcast from the Public Child Welfare Training Academy at the Academy for Professional Excellence, a project of the San Diego State University School of Social Work. For more information about the Academy and the services we offer, please visit us on the web at theacademy.sdsu.edu. You can subscribe to our podcast series by searching for The Academy SDSU on YouTube. If you would like to contact us and provide feedback about this podcast, please go to our website and use the Contact Us link at the bottom of the homepage. Please reference the title of the podcast in the subject line. A very special thank you to our guest today, Candice Kimball. Please join us next time as we explore more topics in the child welfare arena. I'm your host, Bill James. Until next time, let's all support the hardworking child welfare workers out there. Try something new to improve outcomes for kids and families.